SBIR and STTR federal R&D funding. First, if a couple of you could confirm that you can hear me okay using the toolbar on the right side of your screen to send me a quick chat note, that would be great. Again, if somebody could let me know. Okay, thank you, Anne-Marie, appreciate it. Let's go ahead and get started. Glad when technology works out. So we're going to be chatting for about 40 minutes or so, 45 minutes, about the federal R&D funding mechanisms called the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer programs. My name is John Uveri. I'm the SBIR Program Specialist and Technology Commercialization Advisor at the Small Business and Technology Development Center. I'm located in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. We'll talk a little bit more about my team and the other members of our team a little bit later on in the presentation to give you an overview of all of the services that we provide. So here's a paragraph or a one-sentence description that kind of captures all of the key important points of the SBIR and STTR programs. And the bold underlined words are really the key definitive points of the program that make it a unique mechanism that really no other funding mechanism provided by the federal government or nonprofits for that matter have available to them. So the programs are a non-dilutive federal funding mechanism that helps small businesses develop and commercialize innovative solutions to existing problems that the federal government has an interest in, and that those technologies have a significant market potential. Okay, so again, programs are non-dilutive, meaning the government is not taking an ownership stake in the technologies that you're developing using this funding. It's for small businesses. Okay, so you must be set up as a small business, and we'll talk about what's considered a small business later on in the presentation. The goal is to commercialize innovative solutions. Okay, the goal is not just to carry out research for the sake of research and publishing articles in journals. The goal is to commercialize, get a product out in the marketplace. And those products that you're developing should have a significant market potential. So that in a nutshell is what these programs are focused on and what make it very unique funding mechanisms available to us in the United States. The small business, and that again is going to be the component or the entity that submits an SBIR or an STTR proposal, and it's also going to be the entity that is awarded the funds. Okay. That small business has to be set up as a for-profit entity, so it can't be a nonprofit or a not-for-profit. The company needs to be at least 51% owned by individuals. And what that means is that the company cannot be a subsidiary or a wholly owned entity of another company that is, say, a large corporation. For the most part, companies cannot have sold over 50% of their stock to venture capital companies. Okay, so again, 51% owned by individuals is one of the defining factors of the small business eligibility for SBIR and STTR. And that company can be up to 499 people in size. Now, most awards, however, are made to companies with under 10 people in size. Okay, you can still be up to 499 people, but the majority of the companies that apply for this type of funding are truly the smallest of the small. Okay, and the SBA, the Small Business Administration, is the entity that oversees these or defines these eligibility criteria. Now, you might be thinking, well, wow, a company with 400 plus people, they're going to be much more competitive. Why are they not going after this type of funding? Well, one of the potential answers is that a company of that size most likely has other funding mechanisms available to them to carry out their research and development. And another potential answer is that companies that are of that size may not be as, innovative. Yeah, they're still innovative, but are they as cutting edge, perhaps, as companies, that are just starting out? Okay. So let's talk some specifics about SBIR, and then the next slide we'll talk specifics about the STTR program. So SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research, federal agencies with research and development budgets over $100 million are required to participate. And there are 11 federal agencies that meet that $100+ million criteria. Those agencies put about 3.5% of their R&D budget aside into this SBIR program. And that 3.5% is a mandated percentage, again, by the SBA, Small Business Administration. This year, that 3.5% across 11 agencies equates to over $3.2 billion that's going to be available. Okay. The program has been in existence since 1983, and long history, lots of awards have been made, $20 billion of which have gone to many small businesses. So a long history of this program. Of the companies that have been awarded SBIRs in the past, they employ about 1.5 million people today. And that's a pretty significant economic development impact just from this relatively small R&D funding mechanism. And finally, companies that have gotten SBIRs are much more likely to go on and be successful in attracting venture capital or equity financing. Okay, and that could be from angels or venture capitalists or even institutional venture funds. And what this means is that a company that has gotten an SBIR has done a couple of things. They've proven their ability to carry out significant, impactful research and development to these follow-on funders. And they've gotten to a point where they've proven or proven enough of their research and development aims that these follow-on funding entities are attracted to them. Now, the percentage of companies that is successful in attracting venture funding or equity funding that takes into account all companies, might be 1 in 500. So it's very difficult for companies to secure equity capital. So this 1 in 9 is a pretty strong indicator that SBIR helps a company get to a point or get its technology to a point where it is indeed attractive to follow-on funders. The sister program to SBIR is STTR, and STTR stands for Small Business Technology Transfer. The goal of this program, when it was started back in 1984, and the goal still today, is that the program facilitates a cooperative research and development agreement between a small business and, in most cases, a university. Okay? And that university can include private universities, public universities, basically all nonprofit research institutions. Sometimes federal labs can fall within that scope. Okay. There are 5 agencies that meet the criteria of being required to provide STTR funding. Okay, and those agencies we'll talk about in a slide or two. Those top 5 agencies have to put about 0.5% of their budget aside, and that equates to almost $500 million annually. Now, $500 million versus $3.2 billion in SBIR, yeah, it's a much smaller program than SBIR. However, the award rates are very similar, simply because there aren't as many applicants for STTR as there are SBIR. And the reason there aren't as many applicants is because of that requirement that a small business participate with a nonprofit research institution. There just aren't as many collaborative efforts as there are just single small businesses going after SBIR. So what we like to start with is when a company is considering, or a university faculty member is considering, is SBIR and STTR the right funding mechanism for me right now? I like to start the conversation with what is the end game of the research and development that is being carried out? And that end game, again, is commercialization. There should be a very strong commercialization component to the research and development that the SBIR and STTR funds are going to lead to. Okay, so commercialization, very important word, and that flavor of commercialization needs to be woven throughout a proposal that is submitted for an SBIR and STTR. So again, to just further refine what commercialization is, the commercialization should be focused on a novel, innovative product or solution. Okay, and novel and innovative means that it's kind of thinking outside the box. What is a novel or innovative solution to a particular problem that the federal government's interested in? They're not looking for simply tweaking or making better an existing solution. Okay, there has to be a strong, innovative novelty component to whatever you're developing and hopefully commercializing at the end of the project. So both SBIR and STTR programs are broken into 3 phases. The first phase is roughly $150,000 to $250,000, depending on the agency, with an award rate of about 15 to 20%, so about 1 in 6 to 1 in 5. The goal of a phase 1 project is for you to test the feasibility or test the concept or prove the concept of your product, okay, using a research and development methodology. So at the end of the phase 1 6 to 9 month period, you will, best case scenario, have data from your research and development that proves that your idea actually works. It actually was able to provide a solution to whatever the problem was that the agency has an interest in. Okay? So 6 to 9 months is not a lot of time. $200,000, $250,000, not a lot of money when you're talking research and development. So it's really a condensed type of project, again, to provide data that's going to support the feasibility of your idea. If you're successful in developing a data set that proves feasibility in phase 1, you're eligible to submit a phase 2 proposal. And the phase 2 proposal, if it's funded, will provide roughly 24 months of work and about $1 million to $1.5 million in funding to get you to a point of prototype development. Okay? Award rates for a phase 2 go up compared to the phase 1 award rates because you've weeded out a lot of the competition that was not able to prove feasibility in their phase 1. So in phase 2, the end product of that research is going to look very different from one technology to another. So imagine development of a pharmaceutical, right? A phase 1 and a phase 2 might provide $1.75 million. You're not going to be anywhere close to having a fully developed working prototype, right? That's just going to be a drop in the bucket, okay? But this program is still very important in the feasibility data gathering of pharmaceuticals. On the flip side, if we're talking about, say, app development for grade schoolers for teaching them, X, Y, and Z, well, a phase 1 and a phase 2 certainly could be adequate funding to get you to a point where you've got almost a finished product by the end of the phase 2. So again, how far this phase 1 and phase 2 money gets you is going to be highly dependent upon the type of technology and how research and development intensive the work is. So here's a list of the 11 federal agencies that participate in both SBIR and STTR. Okay, noted on the left of the screen are those that participate in both, and those on the right are the 6 that do SBIR only. So a key point here when looking at all of these agencies and trying to figure out which of them is or might be the best home for a proposal that I submit, just keep in mind that each agency has a very, very vast array of interests, of technology development interests. Okay, so Department of Defense, for example, a lot of companies don't consider them as a potential funding resource because they have this kind of preconceived notion of what the Department of Defense funds. Whereas in reality, Department of Defense has a very significant health and health-oriented budget. Okay, health-oriented technologies. The first agency that most companies look at is, of course, NIH, but really they should be looking at Department of Defense as well. So the same goes for all of the agencies. Keep an open mind when trying to figure out, okay, which agency really has the best interest in what I'm doing. So you can look at those agencies and break them further into kind of what we call 2 schools of agencies. There are contract agencies and there are grant agencies. Okay, so let's talk about contract agencies for a moment. Contract agencies are agencies that are very, very focused on the exact solution that they're looking for. So in the solicitations that they publish, they're going to be suggesting that they need a solution to do X, Y, and Z. And if you believe that your solution can do X, Y, and Z, okay, you can go ahead and submit a proposal. If there's any question about whether that's a good fit or not, we suggest that you not submit to a contract agency. So again, they're looking at a very specific set of research and development that's going to be carried out. That's going to lead to a very specific product or service as a solution at the end of the phase 2. Okay, they use a procurement mechanism, which simply means that they often purchase or procure the product that comes that emanates from the research that you do in your phase 1 and phase 2. There are significantly more fiscal requirements, reporting requirements associated with them. The company or the agency is invoiced progress as you're developing your or meeting your milestones in your phase 1 and phase 2. Okay. The largest agencies that are contract agencies are Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, DHS, NASA, EPA, and Department of Transportation. On the flip side, there are granting agencies. Granting agencies are quite different than contracting agencies. The first area of difference has to do with the solicitations that grant agencies publish are often very broad. They are suggesting kind of at a high level the types of solutions or types of problems that they're interested in, and they're leaving it to the proposal writer to suggest or to initiate new ideas that potentially could help solve the problems that they've identified. Okay. There's quite a bit of flexibility. They allow for upfront payment. And the biggest players here are NIH, National Science Foundation, Department of Energy, and USDA. Okay, so as you're looking through the solicitations, you'll see the kind of the key solicitation specificity really jump out at you. So of that $2.3 billion for fiscal year 19, here's a breakdown of where that money is coming from, which of those 11 agencies. You can see that the big player indeed is Department of Defense. They put in almost half of that $3.2 billion. NIH, which is part of Health and Human Services, HHS, comes in at about a third of the budget, all the way down to EPA, which puts in only $3.6 million. So these dollar figures are an indicator of how many solicitations or how many RFPs these agencies are going to be publishing on an annual basis. Okay, so certainly DoD, HHS, Energy, NASA, NSF, they're going to be putting the most topics out there for you to review. Now, these topics, they're called solicitations. Okay, solicitation searching is the first step that a company needs to take when they're going to be starting to dive into the SBIR program. One of the first places that we suggest to go to get a feel for solicitations is a site called SBIR.gov. At SBIR.gov, there's a terrific amount of information, but on the page that is that will come up, you'll find the red circled area where you can look at both open and future and closed solicitations. Okay, now those, when you search on the open solicitations, that is just going to show the handful of agencies that currently have solicitations open right now, obviously, right? So if you are, for example, your technology fits into the Department of Energy's topic areas, and maybe Department of Energy doesn't have solicitations open right now, nothing's going to appear. Well, don't fret, because you can look at the closed solicitations as well. And what that's going to do is give you kind of a bird's eye view of which agencies had an interest in this, in what you're looking to get funding for in the recent past. Okay, and it's oftentimes that similar solicitations will appear again in the future. Okay. Of course, each of those 11 agencies has their own dedicated SBIR and STTR web pages. The link on the screen here will take you directly to them. And by the way, I'll be sending this presentation out to you all so that you have access to these links. So each agency is going to be, some of which are a little bit more user friendly than others, but each of them is going to have up-to-date topic areas and what the release dates are for solicitations if they're not open right now. One of the beauties of the program is that you can submit, or the small business can submit, multiple proposals over the lifetime of the business. Okay, with the exception of one or two agencies, you can submit multiple proposals to the agency for each deadline. So, for example, NIH, if you have a technology that is, we'll say a platform technology that different research projects may be able to lead to different end products, you can submit multiple proposals, and as long as each of those proposals is suggesting a different research pathway, meaning you're not doing the same research, same exact research across multiple proposals, you can win multiple awards. Okay. On the flip side, if you are lucky enough to identify a solicitation at, say, NSF, National Science Foundation, and one at DoD, and they're kind of both asking for the same thing, you could potentially submit a proposal to both DoD and to NASA, or excuse me, NSF, with the same exact research plan. Okay. And if you were fortunate enough to get funded for both, you would have to turn one down because you can't double dip. You can't get funded twice for doing the same research. Okay? So in closing on this multiple submission topic, we suggest that in your kind of work plan or your business strategy planning efforts, plan to submit multiple proposals over the life of the company. Okay, it's going to be a steep learning curve the first time that you submit a proposal, write a proposal and submit it, right? So invest or use the time is a good investment to try it again. Okay, so for the next solicitation deadline, you might submit a different proposal for a different topic area and for a different commercializable product. Okay, and then for the next year, your plan could be, okay, we're going to try to submit for 2 or 3 of these SBIRs, either at the same agency or across multiple agencies. So again, at the end of the day, this funding mechanism can help lead you to development of a kind of a menu or an array of different products or services that will make your company more valuable. So don't just plan on submitting once. It's not necessarily a one and done type program. Once you've identified some topic areas that appear to be of interest to you, it's very important to try to communicate with the agency that published those solicitations. A lot of proposal writers don't take the opportunity to actually communicate directly with the program manager. Okay. It's really important to try to do this because we need to look at the agency as being the customer of your proposal, right? Very important to learn what the customer is really asking for, right? The written solicitation is one piece of the puzzle, but communicating directly with the program staff is another big piece of the puzzle. So take the opportunity to communicate directly with the program staff, and really at the end of that kind of communication, you should have a much better idea of exactly what they're looking for than before you communicated. Now, one other key difference between grant and contract agencies. Contract agencies have a very clear window of time that you can communicate directly with the program staff. So when the solicitation is released, you will have say a 4 to 5 week window of time when you can email and chat directly with the program staff. Once that 4 to 5 week window closes, you have to use an online kind of chat mechanism to communicate, but no more one-on-one communication. Grant agencies, on the other hand, like NIH and NSF, you can communicate with them up until the day of submission. Let's talk a little bit about the budget. When you submit a proposal, you will know the agency's total amount that they will fund. So each agency has a different cap. Again, we talked about $150,000 to $250,000 being the caps across the agencies. NIH has a $250,000 cap. USDA, on the other hand, has a $150,000 cap. But you'll know what that cap is when you identify the agency that you're going to target. The funding that you request is going to be broken into 3 different buckets in the budget that you submit. And those different buckets are, number 1, direct costs, number 2, indirect costs, and number 3, what's called a fee, okay, or a profit margin. So let's start with the fee. The fee is a 7% kind of off the top amount that you can request that is unrestricted money. That fee can be used for non-R&D related expenses. Okay? So non-R&D related expenses that a small business is going to incur when they're taking part in this program are intellectual property protection services, so legal fees, accounting services, right? And other kind of business related, market research, report, purchase, things like that, okay? So the fee comes off of the top. So if you're requesting a total of $250,000, your 7% fee is going to come off of that $250,000. And there's no benefit to not asking for the fee. There's no benefit to asking for only 3% of the fee. Always, always, always ask for that full 7%, because that unrestricted money will come in very useful to you as you go through the project. The second bucket are your indirect costs. Now, indirect costs are those expenses that the business is going to incur that we'll say are not directly attributable to the research and development project that's at hand. Okay, so things like utilities, rent, lease, etc. Okay, so these are expenses that your business is likely to incur no matter if this project was funded or not. Okay, so that in general is the definition of an indirect cost. Agencies will generally allow between 20 to 40% of the funds to go toward coverage of your indirect costs. Agencies, specifically NIH, will do what's called negotiate a indirect rate with you after the award of your first phase 1 SBIR and STTR. So that negotiated rate can then be incorporated into future proposals that you submit with kind of no questions asked. Again, NIH is an agency that has a cap of 40% indirect cost coverage. As I mentioned with the fee, there's no benefit to asking for a very low amount of indirect costs versus asking for the full 40%. As long as you can justify that the percentage or the dollars that you're asking for is going to be used for, is going to be used correctly, they're generally okay with whatever the rate is that you request, as long as it's under the cap. So the third and final bucket of costs that will be incorporated into your budget are direct costs. And direct costs are those that are your business is directly incurring because you have this research and development project going on. So think of it as salaries, supplies, equipment that is having to be paid for to get the research and development carried out. Okay, so the biggest chunk of your direct costs is certainly going to be salaries of the the human capital that's part of the project. So coverage of the principal investigator, um, et cetera, et cetera. When you submit your proposal to the federal agency, there's generally 3 to 4 reviewers that are going to be reviewing it. So the first step when you hit the submit button is that your proposal is going to go through an administrative review process. And as long as you've met all the administrative review criteria, you've submitted all of the forms and proposal pieces correctly, you've used the correct font, you haven't gone over the page limits, etc. They give you a check mark, and then your proposal is forwarded on to proposal reviewers. Again, 3 to 4 individuals will be reviewing your proposal. Generally, you can expect that the first reviewer, well, at least 1 or 2, is going to be somebody with an academic background, right? Somebody who is who are technical experts, but perhaps not as technically expert as you are, right? So hopefully they will be and are able to clearly understand kind of the technical nature of your proposal, but don't expect them to be as high level perhaps as you are. Okay? The second type of reviewer is going to be somebody with more of a business background. It could be another small business, small tech company. It could be a corporate type person, but somebody who's going to be looking at your proposal more from the business commercialization standpoint. And the same goes with the business development person. Generally, they don't necessarily have a business development person reviewing a phase 1 proposal, but they certainly will for a phase 2 proposal, because included in your phase 2 proposal submission is a standalone 10 to 15 page commercialization plan. Okay, so kind of key takeaways from the proposal reviewer side of things is that they are going to be looking very, very closely at the research and development aims that you've set forth in your proposal. So make sure that you've got all your I's dotted and T's crossed when it comes to kind of the research experimental components of your program, but also be very clear that there is going to be at least 1 reviewer who's looking at that commercialization component of your story. The reviewers are going to be scoring 5 key areas of your proposal. Okay, and the agencies call these 5 key areas. They have different titles from one agency to another, but this wording is used by NIH. The 5 review criteria are significance, innovation, approach, team, and environment. And in the next few slides, we'll talk about each of these 5 review criteria. The first review criteria is significance, and you're going to have a page to 2 pages in your proposal document to talk about this. The goal of the significance section is to explain to the reviewers that there is a market or a user base out there somewhere in the world that has a pain point, right, that they want solved. Okay, in other words, it's a business market, right? So your question or the question that you need to help the reviewers understand is, what is that pain point out in the marketplace, right? Who is that? What is the size of the group that cares about this, right? And this, in other words, is defining that there is indeed a marketplace or a set of buyers, somebody who's willing to write a check at the end of the day for whatever you're developing. So don't just assume that because there was a solicitation written about this particular topic, that the reviewers actually are aware in detail of the marketplace. Now keep in mind, the reviewers of your proposal are not the individuals at the agency that wrote the solicitation in the first place. Okay, so there are two different individuals that we're talking about here. So be willing to educate, if you will, the proposal reviewers about who cares, what is the problem that you're solving. The next review criteria is innovation. Innovation is about how novel or how outside the box is your potential solution to this problem that you just identified in the significance section. Again, they're not looking for just incremental improvements to existing technologies, right? They're not looking for you to just make the existing solutions a little bit better. They're looking for you to come in with a truly novel way of solving a problem that's better, faster, lower cost than what's being done today. And of course, if you're successful in developing this novel solution, there's probably going to be some intellectual property associated with your invention, right? So intellectual property is often a big piece of the puzzle when it comes to you as a business developing this new thing. Okay, and in the innovation section, they're going to want to see that you have a plan in place to protect your intellectual property. And what that generally means is that you're going to suggest that at a certain point, you're going to patent or trademark or copyright whatever you expect to develop. Okay. The third area of review is your approach. And the approach is all about what is the research plan that you're expecting to carry out in your phase 1 and phase 2. Is that research plan milestone driven? Have you placed a clear timeline of what you expect to deliver? And what is the supporting data, okay, that you expect to achieve as a result of the R&D that you're planning? Okay, so most people that submit SBIR and STTR proposals have submitted other types of grant or contract documents before, so most of the time people are very clear on what a good research plan looks like. But for those that have not submitted to the government before for R&D funding, it's good to have somebody on board your proposal writing team at your company that has had this experience before. So if this is your first time submitting to NIH and you've never requested funding from NIH before, it's good to have somebody on board that has submitted at least different types of proposals to NIH before, because they're aware of kind of what are those NIH reviewers really looking for when it comes to the approach section. Okay, but again, clear research plan, milestone driven, and can you get this completed in the 6 to 9 months that they're looking to get it completed in. The fourth criteria is investigators and team. Have you at the business put together a solid research and development team, a group of people that can really carry out all of the things that were just explained in the approach section. Okay, and if you're missing key individuals on your small business team, this is a great opportunity for you to use the ability to subcontract. Okay, and subcontracting within the SBIR program allows for up to 30% of the funds to be used by a third party, a subcontractor. Okay, so if you're potentially weak, say, for example, in prototyping, you could incorporate a third party subcontractor to carry out that part of the work that you're not good at. STTR, on the other hand, requires that at least 30% of the work be subcontracted to a university. Okay, an additional 30% can go to that same university or to another entity, and that leaves a minimum of 40% to be done by the small business. So subcontracting really helps to kind of shore up the technical expertise of your entire team. And finally, environment. Again, talking about collaborators or subcontractors. If you do incorporate them into your project, they're probably going to be bringing to your team, in addition to that kind of human intellectual capacity, maybe some equipment, laboratory space, et cetera, that you wouldn't have had access to otherwise. So reviewers will be looking at that environment to say, okay, we understand the work that you're trying to do. We understand that you've got this great team in place. Now, do you have the facilities, equipment, et cetera, to actually get the job done? Okay, so those are the 5 kind of core review criteria. The proposal reviewers will score those areas. If you score well enough, your project will be brought to what's called committee, and the review committee will then discuss your projects and then start doling out the funding from those that scored the best, basically until they run out of funding. Okay, so not all proposals that are actually reviewed get to committee, but you are eligible to receive, if it has gone through the review process, written review comments back from the agency, and that information can then be used to revamp your proposal if there is a solicitation that's still open for the next go around for submission of a future proposal. Okay. So very important information comes from those written review comments. So as you can see that, the process of, excuse me, identifying a solicitation, writing the proposal, getting it reviewed, is really a maze, right? And that's why we highly suggest that as you go through this process, plan on investing a decent amount of time to learn the process, but also plan to submit multiple proposals over the life of the company. So here's an overview of the team that I'm part of here at the SBTDC, our tech commercialization team. We're located throughout the state. What we're here to do is provide confidential one-on-one business counseling. Okay, we all have a technical background, but we're not coming to assist you from a technical standpoint. What we're doing is coming to provide you with counseling as it relates to the business component of what you're trying to accomplish. So through that, we provide reviews of your grants prior to submission. If you receive written review comments back from the agency and you weren't fortunate enough to get the project funded, we're happy to review those review comments with you as you start to strategize about submission or resubmission of your proposal. We also provide equity investment guidance. We oversee a graduate summer internship program that links generally MBA students with companies that are preparing phase 2 proposals. We also have a lot of publications. So if you go to our website, sbtdc.org, and click on publications at the top of the screen, you'll see that there are 2 documents that could be of interest to you. One is our intellectual property guide that gives an overview of all of the different intellectual property protection strategies, again, patents, trademarks, trade secrets, copyrights, etc. And there's also a capital opportunities guide that provides a laundry list of all of the funding opportunities that could be available to you. And this goes far beyond SBIR and STTR. So here's the contact information of the individuals that you just saw on the previous screen. My email address is sbir@sbtdc.org. So if you have questions about the program or are thinking about applying and would like to schedule a meeting to sit down and strategize, simply email me and we can get that process going. So at this point, that kind of ends the PowerPoint session of the presentation. We're happy to answer any questions that you have right now. Feel free to type any questions that you have into the toolbar on the right side of your screen. We can chat about those now. Alternatively, if again you want to submit an email to me going forward, we can chat one-on-one. So we'll take a moment to take any questions that you have, and we can go from there. One point that I will make is that we are fortunate to have all 11 agencies going to visit North Carolina, somewhere in the RTP region. The exact location is yet to be confirmed, but on April 15th, I believe, the SBIR road tour is going to be coming. And again, all 11 agencies will be available to hold one-on-one meetings with you. So if you identify a couple of agencies and would like to chat one-on-one with them, they are going to be available. So more information will come out on our newsletter list, which will incorporate your email address into on that soon. So I don't see any questions coming up on my screen. So again, feel free to reach out anytime. Appreciate your time this afternoon. Hopefully you found this session helpful in kind of getting a broad understanding of these great funding mechanisms. And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.